What's up? What's up? What's up? It's your girl Neek, and you're tuned in to Neek at Night. And tonight, this is part 3 to the Darrel Brooks saga. Now, I did part 1 where I basically broke down who Darrel Brooks was and all of the ins and outs of the case. Then part 2, I did a video where there was victims who was given their impact statements on Darrel Brooks and how they felt. Now, this is part 3 where Darrel Brooks' family is giving their statements about how they feel about Darrel Brooks. Now, his mother, she joined the court via Zoom, and she basically said, listen, my son had my back when I needed him, and I'm going to have his back, period. I'm going to stick beside him. That's pretty much what the mom said. Now, I believe his grandmother and someone else also testified, and he was fake acting like he was like so sad. They even gave him an opportunity to speak, and they said, you know, well, this is your time where you could speak. And he just got up there and just gave a whole heaping dragged out statement, and it's crazy. So if you have not seen part 1 and part 2, definitely watch those videos first. I'm not about to go through a whole full recap again. If you are up to speed, then let's continue. So this is the part where his family gives their impact statements.
Look like I'm turned away, but I'm actually watching you.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Then I'll turn next to Mary Edwards. If you want to turn your camera on and unmute, and then Ms. Woods, if you would.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, let me back it up a bit because I think the first woman was his grandmother.
Support. Okay, thank you.
Do you have all three?
But we're not going to listen to her.
Is this your mom? Yes. All right, so I can see Dawn Woods on the Zoom. Miss Woods, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, I can hear you.
All right, thank you. I know you have your camera on. You're unmuted. There are 2 other individuals on the Zoom. They currently have their cameras off. I believe they're both muted. I would just simply ask that we take one person in turn. You are on the Zoom. It is viewable in the courtroom. I want to acknowledge, ma'am, I did receive what I believe is a written statement that you faxed to the court.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, and then if that is, I'm not sure who joined us at the moment. All right, is that Ms. Edwards? Yes. All right, Ms. Edwards, if you could please, I'm going to have Ms. Woods talk first, and then I'll have you next. If you could keep your camera off and your microphone muted until it's your turn to talk. That way I can give my full attention to Ms. Woods.
Sure.
Okay, wait, my mistake. This is his mom talking right now. It's a white lady who spoke, and she's the one who said that she's going to stick beside him. I thought they said that the white lady was his mama, but this is his mom. Sorry, you guys.
There we go. Very good. Thank you. All right. So once again, Ms. Woods, I believe you sent in a fax yesterday. Is that right?
No, I believe it was this morning.
Oh, this morning. All right. I have
Yes,
that,
ma'am.
and I've read it. Go ahead. What would you like to tell the court? And thank you for being with us today.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon. I have 2 things I would like to tell. One is a written statement, Your Honor, and then I have a poem I would like to read after my statement, if that's permissible. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Mental illness affects everyone. It destroys lives, families, and hurts society. For far too long, it's been a dirty little secret in families that no one wants to talk about. Mental illness is the elephant in the room that so many pretend it's not there. People who suffer from it are often shunned by families and friends, rejected by society, and made fun of, the subject of bad jokes, ridiculed, and judged on YouTube, podcasts, Facebook, and other media posts, used in campaign ads, disrespected, stripped of their dignity. No one cares. No one sees their pain or hears their cries and pleas for help. They are the forgotten ones and viewed by many of not having a place in a society. It is no fault of their own that they have become ill and began to change from the person we all knew. Once viewed as fun, loving, and kind, are now the outcasts of society.
This is his mom.
We say what's wrong with society? They're idiots, unfit. They need to be disposed of, thrown out with the rest of the trash. They serve no purpose. The same my brother's keeper doesn't apply to them. And the Bible, in the book of Philippians chapter 2, verse 4, it says, let each of you not look only to his own interests, but also the interests of others.
All right, let me pause it right now. They're saying that they're about to read his sentencing. Let's see.
Here today that I've considered that. But I also don't want there to be any doubt that somehow this trial was missing something. Because the fact is, Mr. Brooks entered a special plea of not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect in the early summer, maybe late spring of this year. And this court ordered
we'll go back to the mom.
Court-ordered evaluations, and the state retained an expert to also review the issue. Whether the defense team at that point ever hired anyone, they are not required to disclose that. I don't know. But I have 4 well-known doctors who have written this court based upon the orders that were made or one doctor being retained. And these are reports that are thorough. One report is 24 pages. Another is more of a summary. It's 8 pages. Another is 26 pages. And then another is 12. And they look at the discovery information, so police reports, videographic evidence, things of that nature. They have access to any mental health related records from prior stays or things like that. They look at a history. They meet with Mr. Brooks. I've referenced this in the past when competency wasn't so much raised by any of the parties here, but during the trial there was, as Attorney Opper wanted to make a record one day of Mr. Brooks's competency. And I will restate what I stated at that point. I have absolutely no doubt that Mr. Brooks is competent. I'm obviously well versed in the legal standard, but that is not something that this court was frankly ever concerned about at any point in time. I know that his attorneys, when he had attorneys, never raised the issue. And it was really only after the trial began that that issue was raised, I think, by the public based upon what they saw. But Attorney Opper, like myself, had the benefit of having reviewed each and every one of these examinations. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but I think it's important because it goes also to Mr. Brooks's character, which is one of the things that this court must consider along with his rehabilitative needs. And I'm going to read parts of these evaluations so that you all understand the information that I have and why it is my opinion that mental health issues did not cause him to do what he did on November 21 of 2021, and frankly did not play a role. That's not to say that he wasn't diagnosed with something. I've referenced this previously, but that's an antisocial personality disorder. And this is what one of the reports has to say.
All right, so I'm going to pause that right there. Those of you guys who are watching me and also watching Law and Crime, when she actually gives the sentencing, let me know. I'm going to play more of what the mom had to say.
Illness caused them to do the unthinkable. They must be punished. Yes, I agree. There should be some accountability for their actions. But we also must render help. What good is punishment without correction to prevent the act from happening again? In their cases, or many of their cases, treatment, therapy, medication, hospitals and institutions that specialize in helping those who suffer with mental illness need to be offered. And I believe these places can help those who suffer become mentally well. I believe lawmakers and society as a whole need to recognize mental illness. Mental illness cannot be eradicated with prison bars. Mental illness is going to always be there. It's invasive. With treatment and therapy, medication, and hospitals and institutions that specialize in the treatment of mental illness, it can be controlled. What else can we do as a society to help those who suffer from mental illness? How about showing a little compassion, empathy, and some understanding? Families need to advocate for those who cannot speak for themselves or who struggle to understand what's happening to them. Lawmakers should support by providing resources to individuals so they can get the help they need. Now, I've been dealing with mental illness for over 30 some odd years, and here's my take on it. And I think I have a little insight on it. From the surface, I believe that treatments need to be offered. I believe that if treatment is offered early, when the signs of mental illness first shows, and it's addressed and stayed on top of, instead of let people lagger and fall through the cracks, just maybe there would be less court cases.
So in this instance, is she saying that she let her son lagger and fall through the cracks? Because if we're taking her advice, then her advice should be proof of concept, right?
And less people crying because their loved ones was hurt or was injured or killed because someone of mental illness attacked them. Maybe that needs to be done. Treatment needs to be done early and right away and stayed up on, and not let people fall through the crack holes and not be shunned out the door as the saying, you don't have a mental illness, you're just a bad person and needs to be locked up. Jail is not the only answer. Help, treatment, hospitalization, and medication, it plays a big role in preventing this where we are today if it would have been offered sooner. Now, I have a poem that I have adopted, not just for my son Daryl, but for all the people who suffer from mental illness, and I let this be my theme and some inspiration. And I hope that Daryl will find strength in this poem. I sent it to him. And it's a poem that was written by the late, great Maya Angelou. I don't know if you're familiar with her writings, but she was a brilliant poet. And she wrote this poem back in 1969 for a totally different reason. It was during the racial injustice era, but I believe it applies to the.
I cannot. Let me see what the judge is talking about.
And do not sustain a conclusion to a reasonable degree of professional certainty that because of symptoms of a mental disease or defect, Mr. Brooks was rendered to lack substantial capacity either to appreciate the wrongfulness of the alleged misconduct or conform his conduct to the requirements of the law at the time in question. In arriving at this opinion, the following considerations were significant to this examiner. While acknowledging Mr. Brooks' documented history of episodic contacts with mental health professionals beginning in adolescence, most of the time he has had such contacts or received mental health treatment when in custody. In effect, there is not a sustained, documented history of a diagnosed major mental illness for him predating the alleged offense or otherwise. Looked at a psychiatric review from April of 2010. At that point, the defendant was determined to have no medically determinable impairment on which to qualify for disability benefits. The consultant who conducted the review noted that Mr. Brooks' claimed mental illness was not, quote, well established, quote, that the statements that he made at that point were not deemed credible, they were inconsistent and not verified by treatment providers in the community.
So basically what the judge is saying is that he never got no mental health treatment outside of when he was incarcerated. Y'all let me know when she start the sentencing. Let me hear a little bit more what the mom got to say.
Those who suffer from mental illness as well. It's called cage bird. A free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream till the current ends and dips his wing in the orange sun rays and dares to touch the sky. But a cage bird that stalks down his narrow cage can seldom see through his bars of rage. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, and he opens his throat to sing. The cage bird sings with fearful thrill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the cage bird sings of freedom. The free bird thinks of another breeze, and the trade winds that when soft winds with soft signs through the trees, and the fat worm.
I'm gonna pause it. Let me see. Always a flex says you stand by your son. You don't excuse their behavior. Right. I mean, there's a difference from being like, listen, this is my son. I'm gonna stick beside him, and then a mom offering advice and saying this is what we gotta do. My son has mental illness, but then there's no record of her doing any of those things to prevent his path. And he's sitting up there crying.
On the dawn's bright lawn, and he names the sky his own. But a caged bird stands on the grave of dreams. His shadow shouts on the nightmare scream. Their wings are clipped. Their feet are tied. They open their mouths to sing. The caged bird sings of fearful thrills, of things unknown, but long for still. And its tune is heard on a distant hill. The caged birds sing of freedom. Everyone who suffers from mental illness is caged. All they want is to be free of their illness and become mentally well. I believe as a society, we have an obligation to help those become mentally well with treatment, medication, hospitalization, or sent to an institution where they can get the intense help. And if they have to stay for the rest of their lives away from society, at least they are getting the help they need to become mentally well. We are our brother's keepers. And I also want to say to the families who lost loved ones that and those who suffered injuries, that I know their pain, and I pray that the Lord would continue to comfort and heal each of them. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Ms. Woods, and I should have said this earlier. I have 3 monitors in front of me, and the monitor that I'm pointing at right now is the monitor that the Zoom shows up, so that's why I look like I'm turned away, but I'm actually watching you.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Then I'll turn next to Mary Edwards. If you want to turn your camera on and unmute, and then Ms. Woods, if you would.
Yes, ma'am.
If you want to take her camera.
Good afternoon.
And I should say for the record that obviously Dawn Woods was the first speaker, and I have Mary Edwards. If you can let me know who's next to you, please.
Oh, there's no one next to me at the moment. Thank you. Okay. Are we good to go?
I need to know who's in the room with you because I saw them.
Oh, that's my husband.
Okay.
Okay, he's not in the room at the moment.
Well, all right. That's okay.
He's not here.
I just wanted to know I saw someone
problem
else.
with him being here?
No, he can be there since I know who it is. We'll just.
All right, it's my husband is here.
Will he be speaking or just you?
No. No, he's not speaking.
All right, go ahead. Thank you for being here today. And again, if I look like I'm looking to the side, it's because that's where the monitor that I can see you is located. So go ahead.
Thank you, Judge. For the record, my name is Dr. Mary Darlene Edwards, and I am not the wicked grandmother of the West. I am the grandmother of Daryl Edward Brooks, Jr., and I asked to be here today for 2 reasons. First of all, from the bottom of my heart, I want to offer my sincere apologies to those who have been hurt so badly by what has happened here, this tragedy that has been caused by my grandson. I want to also apologize to the family of the little boy. I understand their name is Sparks. And to all of those whose lives have been damaged by this overwhelming tragedy. As a minister of the gospel of Jesus Christ, I want to give the family and those who've been hurt so badly the scripture, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted." And I say this, please know that it's my prayer that my grandson will sincerely and humbly apologize and ask all of you and God for forgiveness for this horrible, terrible deed. Some of you have said that you will never forgive him. Please do not be like the man who drank the poison and hoped his enemy would die. Unforgiveness is a terrible disease, just like mental illness is. Truly, there have been many losses because of this tragedy. Daryl's mother has lost a son.
Let me see what the judge is talking about.
Impaired, goes on to talk about what he did in the immediate aftermath of the parade, including fleeing the vicinity, making efforts to evade detection or response.
I keep going back and forth to where the judge, because the judge is live right now on a different part of the trial, so I'm flipping simultaneously because I can't take too much of them at a time.
responsibility, and other things. Went on to discuss other evidence, including the videographic evidence of the Ring doorbell and being on the porch where he sought to use the phone. He had apparently discarded a couple of small bags, later determined to contain marijuana. And presumably, this is the examiner again, he discarded items to evade responsibility for possessing them. By implication, such conduct strongly suggests his capacity to appreciate wrongfulness was then intact. When responding to law enforcement officials, he followed their
I don't think
commands.
there's anything wrong with forgiveness, but you can't force forgiveness. Like, if you have it in your heart to forgive somebody, then that's in your heart. But to try to tell the families that they need to forgive and try to force forgiveness on somebody that your loved one took out, I feel like that's a little insulting at that point, because it's in my heart whether I want to forgive you or not if you did something to me. And if I choose to forgive you, then that's what's on my heart. But you can't force me or tell me I need to know a scripture to forgive after my whole world has been ripped apart by your family member.
He lowered himself to the ground. We saw that on the recording of his arrest when he was taken into custody and detained. None of the behaviors nor verbal remarks at the time of the arrest suggest he was behaviorally dysregulated or that his reality contact was impaired. Following his arrest and being taken into custody, he engaged in an informal series of verbal exchanges with authorities, and none of his statements taken at face value suggest he was then actively psychotic or that his behavior controls were substantially impaired. She then goes on to talk about the Mirandized statements. This court personally watched every minute of that interaction with Detective Carpenter and Detective Stern, along with the one from the night before.
All right, she's still going over these reports of whether he's incompetent or not.
On evil. Child trauma, bipolar,
All right, well, let me know when she gets back to the sentencing part.
Lost a grandson. Daryl's children have lost a father, and Daryl has lost his mind and his life in the outside world. Daryl's behavior, including his voice, should get the attention of the powers that be, both near and far. Daryl has suffered from bipolar since the age of 12. And it was that disorder that caused him to drive through that crowd. It is my prayer that he will be treated for this illness and managed in a facility that addresses mental health concerns. We must start with a younger generation. Finally, I'm 80 years old, and I have been an ordained minister for the gospel of Jesus Christ for 47 of these 80 years. If you look at my background, you will see that God has used my life to bring about positive change in multitudes of residents in the city of Detroit and beyond. I share this information not to boast. That is not my intention, but rather to let you know that I care about people and their well-being. I've spent more than half of my life helping what the Bible calls the least of these, AKA society's rejects. Since this tragedy, I have become a mental health coach. This will help me better understand this horrible disease, which has plagued my family for generations. Presently, there is a church in Detroit that is planning to establish a mental health clinic on the east side of Detroit. Without hesitation, I will support this effort and do everything I can to help those struggling with mental illness. Before I close, I just want to share with you some facts with regard to mental illness. And I got this from the government's mental health website. There's a myth that said mental health problems don't affect me. Many people don't feel like it affects them. That's a myth. It affects everyone. It's a common problem. In 2020, and listen to this, 1 in 5 American adults experience a mental health issue. 1 in 6 young people experience a major depression episode.
So after this, she's got into mental health. She said she's a mental health coach. She said after this tragedy, she became a mental health coach. What are there qualifications in being a mental health coach, or is it just volunteer based and you could just coach people with mental illness? Or is there like a degree associated to be a mental health coach, or is it just a title? Educate me in the chat, y'all.
1 in 20 Americans lived with a serious mental illness, such as schizophrenia, bipolar disease, or major depression. Suicide is a leading cause of death in the United States. In fact, it was the second leading cause of death for people ages 10 to 24. It accounted for the loss of more than 45,979 Americans in 2020. That's nearly double the number of lives lost to homicide. As a result of this great tragedy, I'm dedicated to living the next chapter of my life with a mental health awareness campaign. I have faith to believe that God will hear the voices of all of those impacted by this horrible disease, as well as the cries of the mentally ill. I thank you for this opportunity to share with you from the bottom of my heart, and my prayers will continue on for those who have been affected.
All right, let me go back to the judge. You said she's making her statements?
Commitment to such a treatment facility. That is something that is simply not on the table. And again, 4 evaluations, not even my own assessment, but 4 evaluations from licensed professionals say
Hold on, let me refresh.
2
this.
individuals testified about you being at that mobile gas station, how you turned the wrong way down a one-way
not
street,
given a sentence yet,
waved
y'all.
your hands in the air, rolled down your window, either exchanged gestures or words with one of the drivers, perhaps 30 minutes or so.
She's still just talking. Let me know when she start the actual sentencing.
God bless you all.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards. Is there anyone else on the Zoom, Madam Clerk?
No, and I reached out to Zach, and he has not heard from anyone either.
All right, Mr. Brooks, we do not have anyone else.
Michelle Allworth.
Oh, we have Michelle Allworth.
Yes,
Sorry
it's
about
not
that.
Marshall Andrews.
Thank you, thank you. All right, if Ms. Allworth then would start her camera and unmute, and we'll hear from her next. Thank you, Madam Clerk. And you are...
Hi, my name is Michelle Allworth. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
I'm kind of
please.
sick. My son's here in the room with me. He's sick from homeschool.
That's okay. Go
My
ahead.
name is Michelle Allworth. I met Daryl Brooks Jr. 17 years ago when we both lived in Sparks, Nevada. He became my best friend, and over time we became brother and sister to each other. We shared so many good times, whether it was hanging out at the house, listening to music, movies, or just having conversations.
All right, so this is the one where I caught her testimony at the end, and I thought this was the mom, but this is the one who basically was like, she got cerebral palsy. He was there for her, so she gonna be there for him, and she gonna stick beside him. That's pretty much what this girl said, but I had caught the end of it.
A good laugh. He always had a smile on his face and the best laughs and jokes. Going out to theaters and a movie, going out to eat, attending Hot August Nights, which is a car show in Reno, Nevada, the rib cook-off. He shared with me multiple times on a daily basis since this has happened last year, how remorseful he truly is. Sorry. He is a very private person when it comes to his feelings and emotions, and it only happens with family and close friends. They say blood is thicker than water. Well, you can choose to make your own family. I've chosen to make Daryl part of my family. I will always have his back, even with his tragic event. I suffer from medical issues as well. I have epilepsy and cerebral palsy. My whole life, I've had it my whole life. Daryl was there several times that I had seizures. He called 911, went to the ER with me, stayed with me by my side when I went home, and helped in any way that he could help me. Sorry. Because of this reason and him being a family friend to me, he lived with me back in 2006 and again in either 2013 or 14. I'm glad he lived with me at those times because I black out during a seizure and I'm able to call 911. He lived with me for over a year. I wouldn't have let him had I not trusted him with my life. He had never shown any signs being this way on what happened November 21st, 2021. This is not the Daryl I know. He is a loving, compassionate, loyal, and humble person. He would give a complete stranger that needed it the shirt off his back, the last dollar in his pocket, or a place to stay. During this manic episode, he had blacked out the whole incident. I have prayed a lot since 2016 because of my medical issues and almost losing my life to a seizure, and even more now since this has all happened. I know what happened
fucking for real.
With those lives being lost and people being injured is terrible. It's something Daryl will have to live with for the rest of his life and always carry that with him, knowing this happened. I hope that he gets the help he needs for his mental illness. My hope as well is that he gets help in a mental facility, and that's it. Thank you very much for your time, everyone.
Thank you. All right, at this time, Madam Clerk, has anyone else joined the Zoom?
No.
All right, then at this time, the court will close the Zoom. The proceedings are being live streamed and family and friends can watch that way.
Why you wasn't doing these fake tears when the families was talking?
As well.
They about to
Mr.
give him a
Brooks,
chance to speak
I'll turn
now.
it over to you then. This is your opportunity to address the court. What, if anything, would you like to say, sir?
Yeah, I do have a lot to say.
Daryl, be for real.
I'm gonna like to stand up if I may.
Go ahead.
It's emotional. I apologize for taking so long. I want to start first.
He should have been an actor. He would have been really, really good.
By giving glory to God. I believe in Jesus Christ wholeheartedly. I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. I believe that he was sent here by the Father to die for all of our sins, everybody. Everybody in this courtroom today, everyone walking this planet, mostly for those of us who will believe. I believe that he was crucified on the cross at Calvary.
I cannot take him serious. So when he was giving his testimony, he was like, they told me this would be hard. This was a hard process, and boy, was it hard. Like, it was just so extra. Like, boy.
And he shed his blood on that cross, and he died, and he was buried, and then he rose again after 3 days to glory. Took his glorious place at the right hand of the Father. The Bible says that he was exalted, given a name that is above all names, so that at the name of Jesus, every knee shall bow in heaven, on earth, and under the earth, and every tongue shall confess that Jesus is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. It's not just something that I was taught by my family. It's something I believe in my heart.
I don't know, man. I do think he a little mental because he really think that this is really like powerful.
A lot of references was made to one of the things I said regarding my conscience being clear. And having the time to think about it last night and to understand that the victims have the right to feel how they want to feel. They have the right to their opinions, and understanding that there's a lot of emotion, pain, frustration, anger, hatred, a lot of emotions. But I don't want that comment to be twisted. I don't want that comment to become another narrative that's ran with and taken out of context. That comment was made is because I made the decision to rededicate my life to Christ when this tragedy happened. In no way did that comment refer to not having any remorse, not having any understanding. It was strictly made to that point that I have repented, that I have asked God for forgiveness, that I have sent many prayers up. Learning how to wrap my head around this whole situation has been extremely hard. Extremely hard. You get minimal time to reflect in a place like this. But one of those minimal times that you get to reflect in a place like this is when you're alone in your cell.
You're going to have a lot of time. Let me see what the judge talking about.
All right, clearly he's going to keep repeating that statement, so I have muted him at this point. It was my hope that he would honor the simple rule of courtesy and decorum, that he show respect to this court. to these proceedings and not interrupt and talk over me, but that clearly is something he is unwilling or unable to do. I'll find my note that I wrote later.
Let me see what he did.
Handgun, one involving the same vehicle and Erica Patterson, and one involving ultimately intimidation of Ms. Patterson. We know that on November 20th, and she was very contrite about this. She told you where she was. She invited you out there. And that you had contact with her on the 20th. There was some physical.
Contact with her on the 20th.
Mr. Brooks, this is my time. You need to not interrupt.
That's the reason why the charge was dropped.
Mr. Brooks,
the state
you need to stop.
said specifically, wrote you, Your Honor, and said that they know it was no incident that day.
Mr.
And
Brooks,
now you want to sit up here.
do not interrupt me or you will be removed to the other
courtroom.
courtroom.
And now you want to sit up here
Stop.
and try to
now.
add something in that you know for a fact never even happened. You want to sit up here
Mr.
and talk
Brooks,
about
every
who
time-
has grace and all this. You talking about someone with 5 kids that don't have custody.
You need to stop
None of
right
them.
now or you will be removed.
Remove me then.
All right? He will be removed. He cannot simply stay
I don't
quiet when
consent
this
to being
court talks.
sentenced anyway. I don't consent to this. Just like I told you, I don't know the.
He'll be in recess until he's
I don't
removed
even
to the other
understand
courtroom.
the true nature and cause.
Child, not him saying I don't consent to be sentenced.
Intention of stopping his tirade. I think there's really no other way to describe it. And this court needs to go through its remarks uninterrupted. And given the history in this case, which is well documented, of his disruptions and inability or unwillingness to follow the very simple rules of decorum and courtesy, which include not interrupting the court, I felt it important under Illinois versus Allen to remove him from the courtroom. As that is, of course, one of the options, and we have the benefit of the wonderful technology here in this courtroom and the adjoining courtroom, which I believe is the equivalent of being present, what I have referred to at times during this trial as the functional equivalent of being present in this very courtroom. But it is important that I go through this without interruption to make the record that I need to make.
She taking a long time too. Like, girl, we already watched all of this. Tell us what you sentenced him to.
Look, we know the distance, right? From at least where he entered.
You and Daryl both
Madam Clerk,
dragging
put
it
my,
on, girl. He did
screen
this,
up,
he
will
did
you?
that. We heard this, we heard that. Girl, what is the sentence?
I'm going to put Exhibit 15 up because I think it's worth doing that. All right.
We already seen all these exhibits.
We know he entered from White Rock, where the first star is on the right side, where it says Fleet 1, unmarked sedan and marked SUV.
She acting like this day one of the thing.
And that's where Detective Casey was. And so we know he goes 1, 2, 3 blocks before striking anyone. And then it's really about 5 blocks of what can only be described as chaos and carnage. We know we have, from the evidence and the testimony, 2 different speed calculations. One from Bosco's, that was the surveillance footage, between 33 and 34.5 miles per hour. And then we have one farther down from the footage from Curry Insurance, where it was an average 32 miles per hour. Now, I acknowledge math is not my strong suit. I did not do a calculation, but I don't think it took very long for all of this to happen. I think it was a matter of minutes.
We
I
know
think 5 minutes would even be far too long. It's probably 3, maybe. And it was somewhat hard to gauge during the trial because of how the state presented, and I don't mean this as a criticism, but they were very meticulous in showing video, breaking it down, showing it at half speed, sometimes 30% speed, to really get an understanding of what was happening. And at no point did anyone ever tell me or tell the jury how long this took. But even though it took just a couple of minutes, there were so many opportunities for Mr. Brooks to simply stop, turn around, turn down other streets before he ever crossed Barstow Avenue. And what we know is that at 4:37, Detective Tom Casey had the first police encounter with Darrel Brooks. Came face to face, Detective Casey at the hood of the car, coming eye to eye. The SUV brushed past him. And here's the thing. Detective Casey said he wasn't going very fast.
Girl.
To me, that tells
me
he had ample time to reflect about what he was about to do. If you look on that map, it's not a pledge, he's not coming in. When you come down White Rock, you can take a hard left on East Main Street. You can take what I call a soft left. I believe it's Pleasant Street. And Detective Casey, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I can't see it on the map. Frankly, you can turn around at any point in time on White Rock Avenue. But instead, and I think if you all try to picture this, as difficult as it may be, there's squads with lights, there's barricades. I know I read
at this point somebody says she don't want to leave a sliver of opportunity for him to get out of this. That's already happened. It's already been 18, 20 days of her solidifying that. We are at the end. Now, I've watched several trials, and at this point, all of those things that she's mentioning has already been solidified in the record. So at this point, once he made his statement, the victims made their statement, the judge has a few words for the defendant, and then they get to the sentencing. All of what she's doing is just repeating. She's just giving us another summary of things that we've already seen. Normally, like for instance, the Ronnie O'Neal case. After all of the closing, the judge said like 2 sentences to him, maybe 3. It was like 3 sentences long of what the judge said, but what he said was, powerful or whatever, about how he felt like the guy was like a monster or whatever. And then he got on with it. This is dragged out. This is like, come on.
Act's motion that Mr. Brooks claimed at one point he was having a panic attack, and he, again, maybe I think he was going to claim at some point he was afraid of police. Why drive toward them? Why take that right-hand turn? There's no reasonable explanation other than he was angry, he was full of rage, and he didn't care who he came in contact with, what he came in contact with, whether he drove past, through, at, he drove. Detective Casey pounded on the hood of that car, saw his face, again, was brushed by that SUV, thankfully not hurt. All of this preceded by the visual signs along White Rock Avenue of the staging of this parade. Floats, bands, banners, signs, people. And as you got closer to Main Street, the spectators lining those streets, which both, I believe, Detective Casey and Sergeant Warner said were thousands of people. Before he ever gets to Barstow Avenue, he comes in contact with, after Detective Casey, Officer Buttrin and Officer Schneider. He has an opportunity, if you look at this map, he could go right on Buckley. Again, there might be police, there might be barricades. You simply stop. You ask, can I get out? No doubt in my mind, any police officer there would have done just that. He could have gone left on Northeast Avenue. Continuing down, he could have gone left on Martin Street. Continuing on, Barstow Avenue. This is where the parade participants, unfortunately, he has contact with them. But he could have gone right on Barstow. He could have gone left on Barstow. And we know from some of the footage that we saw that his car was seen flying past, true, not hitting one at this point, but flying past. There's no logical understanding for Mr. Brooks other than he's in the middle of a parade and he can see them. Anyone driving a vehicle would see what's ahead. And we know from this map, right, what was ahead of him. We saw that video footage. We heard the testimony. Many police vehicles at these intersections with their lights flashing. There's no doubt in my mind that Mr. Brooks would understand a parade was going on. You can turn off my monitor, thank you. We also know it was not yet dark. Dusk. This was from the battalion chief who talked about when he arrived after that first alert at 4:39. It was not yet dark.
Is he getting 2 life sentences?
I think that
is he getting 300 years?
That Mr. Brooks would 400 have seen
years.
All of these people. This is not under cover of
night.
What
is the sentence?
It's of course downtown Waukesha. We saw city lights and many of the street lights I'm referring to in many of the videos. He did it deliberately. Well,
we know that.
Would have
what
been on or coming
is
on.
The sentence?
We know just past Barstow, he strikes his first victim, Nicole White. She was with RE/MAX Services with the hot air balloon. If anyone's seen that, we saw it in the video. That is unmistakable what that is. That would get anyone's attention. If this was a mistake, if he was lost, this was his very first opportunity to stop and do the right thing after causing injury to a person. But he didn't. He did not stop. And then, of course, the Waukesha South Band. It's hard not to think about what I watched and not have this reaction. Those were images that frankly kept me up at night, that I saw over and over and over. For their band director, she is a hero to me, to get up on the stand, to talk about, and that was Sarah Waymeyer Aparicio, to identify each one of her students, talk about their formation, talk about what she saw. So strong for all of you. Mr. Brooks had another opportunity to stop.
Are you going to throw the book at him? Are you going to throw 2 books at him? Are you going to give him 300 years, 400 years, double life sentence, triple life sentence? Are you going to give
Kyle
him
Jewell described as
like what?
The SUV went over people like they were big old speed bumps. I know The Green children were injured around there. Thankfully, their physical injuries were minor, and I know I could probably spend a long time talking about the injuries of the band members, and I'm not going to go through that. They were significant. It was horrific. Thankfully, none of them were killed. And then, of course, moving on to Burr's logistics. Between the band and the Blazers, that is where Kelly Graybow and her 10-year-old daughter, Adelia, were in that adorable Cindy Lou Who costume. And what struck me, and Kelly referenced this in her statement yesterday, was seeing the tires go past her head after she was hit. Adelia had major injuries as well. And then, of course, the footage from the Waukesha Blazers. And Jeff Rogers talked both at the trial, he testified, and he gave a statement yesterday about, again, having to come into this courtroom, talk about all of those who were with him, who were injured, and of course, little Jackson Sparks. Another video that, frankly, is very difficult to watch and hard to unsee.
Somebody
You
said
heard
people died,
not
including
Jeff,
including
but
kids.
Josh Trainer talk about what happened. And
I
Josh,
understand
of course,
it's extremely sad.
being struck.
I've been covering this case, and what happened to them is extremely sad. What happened to the people who are forever affected is extremely sad. Like, there's people who got hit that didn't die who have lifelong trauma that they have to face. But she doing a lot. I can't fast forward her because this is live, y'all. If this wasn't live, I would have fast forwarded her, but this is live.
Brave young ladies who got up during this trial to testify about what they saw, what they did. Jamie and Alyssa, your dancers are proud of you, and because of you, justice has been served. We heard from others, spectators, Deborah Ramirez, regarding herself and her son, that the vehicle was accelerating, not stopping. A moment that sticks out to me was really Mr. Brooks trying to chastise her for not seeking medical attention right away. Her response was perfect. She waited due to the number of injured and all the blood she saw. Understandable. Not something to be chastised for. And then moving on, and again, I know I'm not mentioning everybody. These are just some of the highlights that, and I should call them lowlights, not highlights, but some of the testimony and evidence that really, really impacted the court. Stephanie Bonesteel and her husband testified about what Citizens Bank was doing, hearing the impact against Jane, a very loud thud and an audible gasp from the crowd. Her husband, Adam, was driving the support vehicle, and when he was being cross-examined about why he didn't see the driver, again, he just simply said, "I thought it was my wife that had been hit. All I saw was the red poncho." And the only time we ever heard about brake lights was when Jane Kulik was on that vehicle and he braked so he could get her off the top and run her over. We heard from Matthew Harris, who talked about the red SUV coming straight at them and then veering and going in the direction of the dancing grannies. And again, that audible gasp as he described that eerie sound. He saw a child injured in front, Jane Kulik behind. Actually, the child and Jane Kulik behind, and 2 victims ahead. He saw 2 of the dancing grannies. What he described as the SUV traveling faster than the speed limit. What I wrote down from his testimony is he's a combat vet, and this is what he said. I've never saw anything like this in such a safe area. You could tell he felt bad about not seeking treatment right away for his daughter. He talked about how his wife's a nurse practitioner. And again, he didn't want to direct resources from other victims, that we thought she was okay enough to be home with them. Now, by this time in the parade, it's very clear the spectators are noticing something is not right. The sounds, the atmosphere has changed. There's screaming, there's gasping. There's a noticeable difference. It's at this point, I believe, that Owen was struck, Kelsey was struck. Probably another miracle, given the injuries she sustained, with a tear in her spleen, significant road rash, cuts, requiring facial surgery. What Mr. Knapp described the driver as having eyes completely wide open. And then next we heard from Laura Thien, one of the dancing grannies. She talked about the sisterhood. Another brave woman came in, talked about what happened to that group. 7 people injured from her group, 4 fatalities. She said it all happened in a matter of seconds. All I seen was bodies. It looked like a war. The 6 people who were killed suffered multiple blunt force traumatic injuries, severe, significant, some dying instantly. I was impressed by both Dr. Scheel and Dr. Bidzricki. Dr. Bidzricki for her attention to detail, her looking at that vehicle, inspecting it, looking at the heights where certain damage was done, and it being consistent in height with the individuals that she did the autopsies on. And of course, Dr. Scheel, and both of these individuals have testified before me, but Dr. Scheel, very shaken.
I don't need you to lay hands on me, Kenyatta. I do not need you or your Holy Ghost.
We then, continuing on, heard.
I just never seen a judge take this long with sentencing after the end.
Man. He too talked
Normally
about
they
how
give
he
like
noticed
3
something
sentences
unusual.
about how
Saw
they feel
an
like the
SUV
guy's a
flying down the
monster, he
road,
deserved it,
heard
da da da.
thuds.
And then they give the
It was
sentence.
faster than anyone in their right mind would be going. He estimated it to be over 25 miles per hour.
I've never seen a judge take this long after
And then Lucas Hallmark,
everything was all said and done,
the
after the
off-duty
witnesses then gave their statement.
police officer who was walking with his family on that day.
They normally be like, you got a special place in
He
hell
talked about
or
the
something.
commotion
You know,
behind,
maybe
the
they don't
large
say you
amount
got a
of
special place
screaming.
in hell, but they say like,
You could
they say stuff
feel
like to
it was
scold the
palpable when he
person.
testified
But
about
like, this is like
having
very
the
long.
wherewithal to try to get his kids out of the way, throwing his 3-year-old as far as he could out of the way. You could see the pain on his face when he talked about not being that successful with his 7-year-old. He said, I wasn't quick enough.
You said not in high profile. Psh, the judge
He
in the Ronnie
testified
O'Neal
that he
case,
thought
I do not
this
remember
was a
him taking this
terrorist
long.
act. That SUV did not stop.
Ronnie O'Neal was very
They
high
referenced the
profile.
speed already. The ACE speed
The one was like,
estimation
"You
from
think I'm
Detective
playing?
Carpenter,
God damn it, I'm not," or
33 to
whatever he
34 miles
said.
per hour, a little bit more than that. The
He
speed
was- the judge
calculation
was
by
not this
Michael
long.
Smith from State Patrol from farther down the route of averaging 32 miles per hour. And then, of course, the vehicle inspection by the State Patrol, finding no mechanical issues. There was also the Franklin Assistant Chief who attended the parade. He was near West Main Street in Maple. He provided the testimony regarding the SUV, the window being open, and the driver sticking his head out.
Ronnie O'Neal is black. What are you talking about?
He testified how he thought perhaps it was either a medical emergency, maybe even a mechanical issue, but it was clear once that SUV passed him and he saw that driver. He saw you, Mr. Brooks. No panic, no distress. His heart sank. He knew it was not a medical emergency. The body language just didn't fit. It did not believe it was mechanical at that point either. And then he saw the vehicle crank to the right. As he testified, he seemed excited about what he had done.
The judge with Jesse Smollett was this long?
Another off-duty police officer, this one from Wauwatosa, talked about how he saw Mr. Brooks after
I don't remember the judge with Jesse Smollett being this long either.
Yell out an expletive and run southbound with his sweatshirt still on. We all saw that video. Of course, at one point, Officer Skolton had contact. And as he testified, he put things together. Keep in mind all of the radio traffic, right, about one person, then like 15 people, and another 15. It was very apparent to him that although he was on the far end, he was around the dog leg on Wisconsin and Maine, that a vehicle had driven through the parade. He saw this vehicle. Of course, at that point, it was heavily damaged. He made the decision to use deadly force. What did he do after? What did Daryl Brooks do after? We crashed the vehicle. He fled the scene in a hurry. He changed his appearance, took off his sweatshirt, loses his shoes, I think in a hurry to get out of there, not caring that they had fallen off. He puts his hair up. We saw that on a number of videos. He asked unsuspecting people to use their phone to call an Uber. All within minutes of all of this happening. He was in such a hurry to get out of there, he left his phone in the SUV. He calls his mother, who arranges for an Uber. We heard from the Uber driver. He never showed up. It was nearby, ultimately, where he was found. And then, of course, the ring footage of his contact with Daniel Ryder. That is at 5:01 p.m. Minutes after all of this happened. Mr. Ryder was astute, noticing that after Mr. Brooks being in his home for maybe 8 to 9 minutes, he saw squads driving by. I think you could say his gut told him something wasn't right. And he had Mr. Brooks go onto the porch, of course, after having given him a sandwich, given him a coat to wear. Ultimately asks him for his coat back. And then, of course, the arrest. This is where some of the lies become evident. Mr. Brooks claims ultimately when he's being interviewed by Detective Carpenter, they have to actually seek medical clearance for him because he claims that he was thrown to the ground when he was arrested. He was not. The video is very clear. He cooperated. He laid down. There was no use of force used at all to take him into custody. But we know ultimately that he lies about what he was doing in Waukesha, how he got there, who he was with. He lies about having contact with Erica Patterson the day before. We know when he's found, he has the Ford Key credit card, not only in his name, but one, whether it's a credit card or like a benefits card, but it's in the name of Erica Patterson, and of course an ID for himself, a state-issued ID. The Ford itself is registered in his mom's name. It's the same address. that's on his ID, and there was documentation.
Thank you for the
found
donation.
in the Ford Escape. He's now in custody. He's taken to the substation, ultimately taken to Waukesha Memorial Hospital. What's notable about the video and audio clips that this court reviewed from the hospital, Mr. Brooks is calm. He's coherent. There's no obvious signs of impairment, no obvious signs or really any signs of mental distress. He makes statements that he's not from the area. He doesn't appear disoriented or confused. At some point, there's kind of a jovial atmosphere between him and one of the detectives. The next day, he lies to Detective Carpenter, denies driving to Waukesha. I got a ride. He makes up the story about a tan Kia. He's very nondescript and vague with the information that he provides. And over the course of those 5 hours, he never once references the parade. He never once says there was another driver. Of course, they start talking to him initially about the domestic altercation because by that time it's very clear a link had been made between Erica Patterson and the call that police originally received of the domestic, or at least an altercation near Frame Park, and Mr. Brooks. We also know, because of the bond conditions in the 2 felony cases, he's not supposed to have any contact with her whatsoever. But he does. At no time during the 5 hours on November 22nd does he make any admissions. Does he show any concern for any of the victims? No empathy, only lies, only concern for himself, for his family. Can I have a phone call? He does not provide, and I said this already, the name of anyone else that could be driving that vehicle. At one point, Detective Carpenter says, one of 2 people drove through the Waukesha Christmas parade. Either a God-fearing person who screwed up or the malicious guy. Daryl Brooks' response is, don't spin it. One of the things that has become abundantly clear throughout this trial, Daryl Brooks understands exactly what he's doing. His comprehension is fine. I have absolutely no concerns and have never had any concerns throughout this case and throughout this trial, or even through the past day and a half regarding his competency. He's intelligent, he's deliberate, he's purposeful. He made nuanced arguments during this trial, one about the right to counsel versus the right to the assistance of counsel. That's a sophisticated legal argument, not the product of someone who doesn't understand. He asked questions on cross regarding tint, horns. He brought up the recall after the fact. He talked and asked questions about, question about barricades, police being at the intersection. Although we never fully understood what his defense was, what became very apparent to me as I reread through all of my notes is that from the very beginning, he wanted to argue jury nullification. If you go back to his opening statements, he talked about power and the jury doing the right thing. He repeated that theme during his closing statement. At one point, he objected to evidence based upon a violation of one of the court's pretrial rulings. Again, a pretty sophisticated objection that resulted in the court striking an exhibit that had previously been received. Today, he spent close to 2 hours talking on his own behalf without any notes. He covered a variety of topics. want to talk next about, here's my note that I found. One more thing on Mr. Brooks. You know, at times, right, we've seen the eye rolling, the fake clapping, the laughing, hand gestures, many times and most times very emotionless, unless he's doing those things, which would be really inappropriate and are inappropriate. His reactions are largely negative when things are not going his way. What did this community suffer as a result of this tragedy, this malicious conduct by Mr. Brooks? Well, I think many of the victims who spoke said it best. Lori Locken described it as this: a sense of personal safety you robbed from us. I believe it was Bill Mitchell who said, the only life he seems to value is his own. Jason referred to it as evil. And he talked about innocence being stolen. He called the defendant a coward. No remorse. What he said is, you look like a monster. You look disrespectful to court and witnesses. You look like a callous jerk. But I forgive you. Such character, such compassion. Margaret talked about the mental, physical, and emotional toll this has taken. She talked about how it was so traumatizing that her mind won't let her see everything that has happened, and that she's worried when her mind might allow her to do that. I'm thankful that she's 95% back to normal. She talked about emotionally every day, she's reminded of the physical pain and the loss of self. But she's had tremendous support from family and friends, and that today she will move on. Jeff Rogers also commented on the lack of remorse and sympathy for the victims, how he has had to relive just the immenseness of this, the confusion.
All right, y'all. I wanted
depression,
to see the
as a
sentencing live, but
irritation.
she's taking way too long.
He talked about how
Like, the
his son,
trial
Caden,
has been
was so concerned for his younger
day
sister.
in and day
I'm really
out,
glad Riley is okay.
hours and hours and hours.
I believe that
and
was from the day of the
She should
parade.
already be at the point where she's just giving out the
And how
sentence.
he recognized he was inches away
So-
from losing 3 of his 4 kids just because of
It's 68 victims, 6 people or 8 people deceased. I can't think I will put in the comments what his sentence was, because I just don't know why it's taking this long for her to just say, like, the sentence. Like, we understand why she's going to throw the book at him. We know she's going to throw the book at him. We know he's going to get football numbers. We've seen him disrespect her. We've seen him have no regard or remorse for the victims. So to go through each and every victim, you said give it 5 minutes, child. I guarantee you she's not going to be ready for the sentence in 5 minutes. And I mean, I cannot. So I'm going to tell y'all in the comments what the sentence was once she's done. I'll catch y'all next time. Peace out.